Hey, everybody. Today, we are going to outline some of the most common mistakes that SDR organizations make, whether they're just getting started. Maybe you're a founder, a business owner trying to create an SDR organization, and or you're an organization that is considerable size, mid-market enterprise. You're a rep in seat at one of these large companies. There's a lot of things that companies do unknowingly that really set either the reps up and or their entire organization to fail. So today we wanted to break down 6 of the most common things that really handicap organizations either before they even get started and they're trying to build out their first SDR organization, or over time, some of the things that really, I would say, grow into exponential problems that cause a lot of chaos down the line. But nonetheless, I'm here with Connor Murray, who's a 2-time #1 SDR manager at Oracle. We've worked in tech sales for almost 2 decades combined at this point. And Connor, maybe I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself and we'll start to break it down from there.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. And this is a topic that hits close to home for me because I experienced it myself. I've told this story on your channel before. When I came out of college, started my SDR role, I was ready to hit the ground running, ready to be the hardest worker. And after 6 weeks, implementing all the stuff I was taught, I found myself dead last in the stack rank for my cohort. And then I've seen it as a manager too, some of the pitfalls that reps and teams fall into and how I kind of tried to reverse that trend. So whether you're a rep, I think this will hit home for you as well. And maybe you're going through it right now. And if you're a business owner, sales leader, I think these are some things you should be considering anytime you're bringing on a new rep to make sure they ramp up to into role as quickly as possible and you position them for success.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think really diving right into our first major point, and this is both for business owners that maybe are building out that SDR function for the first time, and or to your point, you work at one of these behemoths, a large market leader. They have so much collateral. They give you anything and everything. Really, I wanted to start there with the first point of just giving reps too much, whether it's unstructured information from that company that's trying to build out the SDR function for the first time, or in your experience at Oracle, where you're getting tons and boatloads of information. Maybe break down how that really stresses reps, doesn't set them up for success, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most common mistakes I see. It's definitely how I felt initially, is that it's just information overload. You dump everything onto these reps, these brand new reps who are still literally getting used to the computers you gave them and how to use some of the new tools. Like, everything's a mental strain. They barely know what sales is yet. And the training they're getting is this deep persona-based training with paragraph essays on their ideal customer profiles and all the pain points and these long customer stories, these battle cards for your top 12 competitors that are stuffed with information, and tons of different cold call scripts with deep discovery questioning in there. It's information overload. It's almost like you're trying to train an enterprise AE rather than meeting a new SDR where they're at. A quick analogy I'll use, because I think it'll just make sense to a lot of people, is think about someone who's 20-something years old going to the gym for the first time in their entire lives, and you're the trainer, whether you're a fitness expert or not. What do you think is better for them? That you start them off with some super complex, heavy deadlift, squat, bench, like hyper intense sets, ISO movements, or is it better to just get them started with the basics, push-ups, sit-ups, maybe some basic dumbbell movements? I would say it's the latter, because that's what's actually going to get them to come back to the gym. If you overload them too much, they'll go for a few days and then stop. And what I find is, if you don't simplify things and really just focus on, okay, what are the highest value things I need my reps to be able to do within the first 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? How can I package this for them and also make it easy for them to execute on? That is what is most important, because you have this, I say you have about 4 to 6 weeks. There's this hurdle you have where reps in their head, if they're not experiencing success, or at least see a path to experiencing success at that point, they start to question whether sales is for them. They start to question whether this is the right opportunity or whether they're actually going to grow and be successful here. And you kind of lose this opportunity, this very brief opportunity you have in the beginning when they are fired up, they are ready to soak in information, they're ready to hit the ground running. So I really focus on I don't know if dumbing down is the right language, but giving them what they need. And we can go into that, but what that looked like when I was a manager was email templates that I know work, because I've sent thousands of emails at that point at the same company, and I know they statistically work. Cold call scripts that I know work as well too, and then a basic cadence for them to follow so that they know what they're doing at what time of day. And I'm a lot more hands-on in the beginning because they want me to be. And I simply walk them through the motions, get them used to hearing yes, whether it's over email or the phone. And you can very quickly overcome a lot of those fears in their head, and they start focusing on optimizing the process you've laid out for them. You can layer in all the discovery, battle card, persona-based training over time. You don't need to overwhelm them with that out of the gate. So we can go more in depth on that, but that's at a high level how I look at it. It's system overload in the beginning is like the biggest mistake a lot of organizations make when they bring on new SDRs.
Completely. I think it's a combination of the education and them doing it and failing early and often. You have to build some tolerance in for them failing. But I would also add, I think, maybe you're on the side where you're a business owner and you don't really have any of that infrastructure in place. This is the first time you're hiring SDRs. I also think when we're thinking about, okay, well, maybe I don't have a playbook, I don't have scripts, I don't have anything. What is the baseline I can get in front of reps? I would say a common thing that I see, I won't speak for you, with some of the businesses we work with, is they're just like, hey, here's, all the tools you need. This is what I found. I got you Zoom info. I got you Salesforce. I got you a power dialer. Go crazy. Yeah. And in reality, even though you maybe need them and you're maybe hiring someone with experience to say, hey, run the playbooks that worked for you, you haven't even defined critical things for them of like what their territory is, who you actually sell to and why. What companies are you not just a good fit for, but like particularly, whether it's existing companies, maybe you have a track record of working with e-commerce companies between 100 and 2,000 employees, right? There's a very practical launch pad that you can actually use to get your rep up and going. And if it works for you, kind of segues into our next major point, which is whether I would say you have no infrastructure in place and you haven't put a lot of thought into that, you're generically chasing demand, maybe from some type of intent tool or some LinkedIn post. You're trying to build a brand as a founder. Or on the flip side, I think these companies get to such a large scale, the SDR organization is reorged every 12, 18, 24 months. And all of a sudden, reps are just kind of making it up as they go when it comes to a core infrastructure of what leads are they going after? Why are they even a fit for all these people they're trying to outbound to? I'll hand it over to you, Connor, to expand upon that. But I would say that's the biggest thing of any size that I see sales reps failing to do, is really, really define the verticals, the companies, the profiles that they work explicitly well for, not just pretty good because in theory, an insurance company could use our database.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the key things. I had to learn that myself. And that was one of the key things that flipped my success as an SDR. Was initially I would just take generic, at the time I was working at Oracle messaging. And I would just go into, okay, these are my accounts. Let's get some people who are relevant job titles or relevant triggers in those accounts and just kind of send the same message to all of them. Or I would try and individually do research in between each dial or email based on what I saw. And I didn't have anyone who taught me to organize this up front. So like, this is just an example of what you're saying. We used to sell a pretty broad application suite. We had products for finance people, HR people, supply chain, marketing. One thing I did was start to separate my list by finance personas, HR personas, supply chain. Then I took it a level deeper and did it by industry. So finance personas that work in banking, finance personas that work in retail, and same thing for HR, supply chain. And I had all these key categories broken out, and I had specific trigger events too. Like those can change depending on where you work, but we had a good product for companies that had undergone an acquisition within the last 1 or 2 years. So I had a whole list of contacts that fit that trigger event. And then I created email templates that were associated for each of those lists. A new rep comes in and has no idea how to do that. A lot of them don't even know to think that way. So that was one thing I did with my reps when I was, that was one of those quick launchpad type things to do with them, is just, you don't have to go super granular out of the gate, but just get those basic personas in place that you have a good value proposition for and have seen success with in the past. Or if you're brand new, just going to market, at least where you think you're going to have success, give them some sort of way to organize and change their messaging and adapt it just to give it a slightly better likelihood it resonates with the persona they're reaching out to. That was one of the biggest differences I made. So when I was a manager, I don't even know if I've ever told this story before. When I was new, there were 2 other teams that started with my first team. There were about 10 reps a team. all same start date and everything. I won't go into specific numbers, but after the first 2 months, all 10 of my reps had booked multiple meetings at that point in the first 2 months, generated quality opportunities. On the other teams, one of them had 2 that had done so, like generated a qualified opportunity. One had 1, and our team had generated over 10 times the amount of pipeline. And that was like the key differentiator. Why? Is I taught them to segment their lists. I gave them the email templates I already had. Like, I told them, I literally said this: I know you're new. I know you probably have never reached out to CFOs before, barely even know what you're talking about yet. You can just trust me. These templates work statistically. I've used them before. Now I'm going to walk you through how to actually go about implementing this, the cadence, how you can shift between the lists and everything. And I was very hands-on with them in the beginning. And then over time, as they got more comfortable with it and were able to do it on their own, that's when I backed off, because I didn't like to be a hands-on manager. I like to give my reps trust, but I knew I had that beginning phase where I could do things like segment their lists, give them templates I know worked, train them on cold calling, and they were really eager for that coaching. And then over time, give them more rope and more trust, and let them do things their way once they've earned that right.
Yeah, completely. And I kind of want to tie a bow on that, if you will, going into our third point, which to some extent, I think at this point is a bit self-explanatory, which is not tracking the success rate of scripts, of emails, of things of that nature. But also, I think it's so important for large organizations training new SDRs and or people trying to bring in their first ever sales hire that makes them successful. I just want to reiterate, this is maybe in more detail and granularity why a new rep comes in and within 6 to 8 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it may be, the reason they feel like that, they get dejected and ultimately leave, and you wasted 3 months of your time hiring them, an additional 3 to 6 months while they floundered and ultimately use that job to just parlay into a better organization, is because it's not only that they're not getting results, but they're so overwhelmed by everything that they don't know, and they have no even basis to like grapple on. Like, it's a very defeating feeling. And I've worked at a startup that kind of like was entering a new space, kind of making it up as they went. Ultimately, the product wasn't mature enough, and for a lot of reasons, it really didn't work. But part of that problem, at least at the individual rep level, is like, I came in with a very strong sense of like, hey, let's try this messaging, let's do these things. But over time, it just became clear that like, with this new product we were trying to sell, we didn't know who the ICP was. We didn't really know any messaging that could consistently, at least once a week, get me a new meeting with a new customer. And while some of that is on, why you're hiring salespeople to figure some of that out, if you have nothing and or you make it so impossible for them to decipher and just get like a win really quickly without doing these things, this is like, if you don't even have this as a baseline, in my opinion, you're wasting your time like adding reps and or hiring your first one in the first place. But I know maybe parlaying that into the actual tracking of results, again, at this point, I hope it's self-explanatory. But if you had any thoughts on any of that and or, the importance of tracking just to get a baseline, that's the third major point I see, is people are just like, hey, here's this email template. They manually trigger it in Gmail. There's no tracking. And it's just, it's everyone for themselves.
Correct. Everything you just said is correct. Reps get burnt out and hopeless when it's not necessarily because they're not getting results. It's when they're not getting results, they don't see a path to improving or getting results, and they don't know why they don't know why they're not getting results. They can't pinpoint it. And it can be different for each category, like cold calling, cold emailing. But I literally used to keep a spreadsheet as a manager just for myself, because it helped me know where to coach reps in terms of, okay, different problems can have different symptoms. So I would track how many meetings are they setting, how many of those meetings convert to opportunities, like qualified ops, what's the average deal size of those qualified ops, because different symptoms would tell me different things. If they're booking a lot of meetings, but they're not converting to opportunities a lot, that means they probably need to work on the lists that they're reaching out to and how they're going about qualifying their accounts and trigger events and things like that. If it's a different symptom, like meetings that, like the average deal size, that's a totally different symptom. But even beyond that, like specific things like cold calling, if you're not doing well at cold calling, it could be for quite a few different reasons. That's why you want to be tracking the number of dials you're making, your answer rate, and your set rate at a bare minimum. You can go more in depth and get more granular than that. But if at the end of the week you don't book any meetings, that can mean a whole bunch of things. Is it because you simply didn't make enough dials where if you made 15 dials per day, yeah, you're not giving yourself enough chances? Is no one answering? Maybe you made 100 dials a day, but your answer rate was like 2%. Okay, how can we focus on improving the answer rate? What times of day are we calling? What type, like, how are we using Zoom info in our CRM and things like that? Or are people answering? Maybe you had a 20% answer rate, but you had a set rate problem. Okay, like what's the value in the value statement we're delivering? That can be a whole can of worms to unpack. Are you struggling at the opening? Are you struggling when you're going for the meeting? Like are there specific objections you're getting hung up on? And then same thing with email. It's like, you're not getting results over email. Well, are people opening your emails? If not, that's maybe subject line and the first line in the preview of the email is what you need to focus on. Are they opening them and just not responding? Well, then you should probably look at the value piece of your email and why you're reaching out. So it's important to, when reps aren't having success, it can mean a whole bunch of different things. And you want to, at least as a manager or a leader, it should be your job to track some of these basic inputs yourself. If you're not doing that, then it's like, what are you managing? Like you have to figure out where your reps are struggling. But as a rep, you want to be taking this into your own hands. And we talk about basic inputs you can track for cold calling and cold emailing. For example, for cold calling, it's number of dials, answer rate, set rate. For emailing, it can be open rate, reply to meeting rate, like when people reply, how many of them are yeses versus nos, things like that. And you can get more granular, but even on cold calls, you can even track the types of objections you get every time you get one and what % of the time you're handling, because you kind of learn you're better at handling some versus others, and you start to plug holes where you're weak. And over time, you kind of increase your batting average when it comes to setting meetings. Those are just some concrete examples tactically where you can track results. But I think all managers and all sales leaders have their own inputs they should be tracking as well. That should tell them certain things about their reps and where they are doing well versus struggling.
Yeah, 100%. No, really well said. And I think that also transitions well to our next point, which is if you're at an established org and you have a lot of lead flow, and or maybe you're that company that now has some SDRs, there's a little bit of traction there. I think one of the things I see, and this is really, I would say, down to the rep feedback necessarily more so than like an individual company, is treating all leads the same. And what I mean is obviously there's inbound versus outbound leads. If you're not familiar, just very simple distinction. An inbound lead is someone that requests pricing for your product. They're already interested. They're already aware. They're coming inbound to you versus outbound. A company has maybe no idea who you are. You're reaching out completely cold, et cetera, et cetera. But even within that, and I'm curious your take on this as well, I see, especially when it comes to inbound leads and or old leads, old opportunities, a lot of reps just kind of batch them in as like inbound versus outbound, and the analysis stops there. And again, whether you're that company that's, starting to get some momentum, starting to get some traction, you're excited you have inbound leads, you treat them all the same versus taking a little bit of extra time to build a specific motion for a pricing request versus a demo request versus a webinar attendee versus a marketing white paper. I could go on and on, but I think a huge area, a missed opportunity that I would say is a little more advanced than just call it your foundational, but now it's like things are clicking. You've got some momentum. How do you actually capitalize on that and move, your meeting rate or your win rate from 53 to 60%, et cetera, right?
Yeah. I think you just captured the examples pretty well. You're right. Like a lot of people, it's like inbound leads, like they have this whole list of just inbound leads and it's not segmented by, okay, what size company are they? Like who made the request? What job title are they? How big is their company? What product? I don't know if you have different products or pillars, like what did they request inbound? Stuff like that. And that's another example where a brand new SDR is going to have no idea or even have remotely the mental capacity to be thinking about that stuff when they're new. You as a leader, you as a manager should be outlining the basics for them in that area. This is where you need to be more hands-on in the beginning and start helping them be more targeted in their outreach without them needing to overthink or slowing them down or overwhelming them, because that's what's going to help them get meetings on the board quickly. And you made a point earlier I wanted to call out because I think it's such a great point, is like, it's so important to just get these reps like a taste of a win in their mouth in those first 4 to 6 weeks. And this is one of the key ways to help them do it. Because if they don't, that's when they start questioning And I can't explain how much it helps them too and gives them confidence in their outreach when they finally hear yes. They actually get on one of these calls too, so they actually know what they're calling or emailing about. Like, a lot of these reps have never been on a discovery call. They don't really know what they're positioning for these customers. And then they get on and they're like, oh, that was actually a well-run call. And I understand how these types of calls and cycles are starting to work now. And now I feel more confident as I reach out. But if you're not helping them segment leads and just giving them inbound versus outbound, come up with your own messaging from the training we gave you that like watered, like just absolutely showered them with different material on battle cards and discovery questions. They're not even going to know where to get started, and they're just going to become too overwhelmed and in many cases burn out before they ever had a chance to ramp up or be successful.
Yeah, completely. And I would say even worse on the business owner founder side that is either hiring for the first time or just building out a team is like they establish all these ground rules and everything's fine and dandy. And then, I don't know, JP Morgan comes inbound and has a pricing request, and the founder who has handed everything else off to the SDR says, nope, I'm taking that one. Sorry, guys. It's JP Morgan. And you just completely deflate their confidence because they've been grinding for you this entire time. And you're not even willing to give them a layup when, yeah, they found some good opportunities for you. And you could make the case, oh, this came inbound, they didn't really work for it. But, those are just very common examples of things I see. And I know we've got 2 more quick points here as we kind of go towards a close. I would say this one especially is as you get cooking, you have SDRs and account executives, certainly at large organizations. I've seen this at organizations as small as 100 people to thousands of people as well. Territories change. The SDR function, like many different functions on the sales side, is prone to change, to reorg every 12 to 24 months. One of the things I see that gets lost in that, or someone who's just starting an SDR team, is there's no standard or enforcement of qualification, requirements for a deal and or documentation. So I'm an SDR. I have a call with someone who agrees to take a meeting, but yeah, they show up and it really went nowhere. I didn't even qualify it. And I didn't really have a good reason to the account executive that I set that meeting for as to why it even exists. So there's many ways to tackle the problem, and story for another time, but there's actually a lot of AI tools that I think make this very easy. Once you have a call, to summarize notes, to set up your account executive or founder or broader team for success. But have you seen that impact, relationships between SDRs and AEs? And where do you think a lot of people go wrong on that?
So I'm going to take the other side here. So there's 2 sides of the coin. Yes, there are organizations, if you have no criteria in place and it's just set meetings, get people to show up for meetings, that's not the approach. You're going to create friction for your SDR and AE because you're incentivizing your SDR to just bring anyone to the table. And then statistically, a bunch of them are going to be a waste of time, and the AE is going to start to get pissed off with that. That's definitely a problem. On the other side, and I actually see this more, is that they make the criteria for a meeting way too stringent. They basically need a fully qualified deal with BANT, budget authority, need, timeline. They have to have actual budget in place. We need to know who's signing off on this. They have to have a timeline. And at the same time, they set a 15 meeting per month requirement for the rep. And it's like, really? How is this rep supposed to fully qualify, spend five to 10 minutes on a discovery cold call or email type conversation to get all of that information to set up a meeting, and you're telling them they need to set 15, 20 per month? I see this all the time, and it's just an absolute killer. It totally leads to burnout for SDRs. So you have to kind of pick which side. The answer is usually somewhere in the middle, but it's like, do we just want to incentivize my rep to get as many people to the table as possible that are and put some criteria on it? Like, they got to be a qualified persona. There at least has to be part of BANT on there. Usually it's like, okay, there needs to at least be a clear need, and we can figure out budget, authority, and timeline on the call. Or do you want to go the other side where you only want your AEs taking fully qualified calls? But if you do that, then your meeting requirement should go down. So I think that's such an important topic in terms of the criteria you lay out for your SDRs and aligning their KPIs to match that, and just the KPIs you set for your reps in general. Like, are you going to do it on a meetings basis? Are you going to have an opportunity requirement? So like, maybe they can bring as whoever they want to the table, but a certain percentage of them percentage have to actually lead to qualified opportunities? Do you put a pipeline value associated with that? You have all these different levers you can pull, and depending on what your goals are, what stage your business is, I think they should change. Like if you're a founder just going to market, I think you should just be talking to as many people as possible and figuring out what works, and you can layer on more stringent criteria, meeting criteria once you start to get a feel for it. But on the opposite end, if you do have product market fit and you have a really good fit for, I don't know, people like senior leaders in finance departments, yeah, don't let your SDR bring some like marketing director to a call. That'd be ridiculous. So that's something that I think a lot of organizations get wrong. And I actually see the more stringent criteria being a bigger problem than not having enough criteria for these calls.
No, 100%. I think, yeah, really well said. Definitely two sides of the coin. And I've seen it go both ways. And yeah, both at the organizational level that creates havoc and also the rep level, to your point. It's like if you have two, because I've been in this situation when I was an SDR for a brief period of time and they changed it. But it's like they updated the qualifications to basically, you almost had to run like a full discovery call on a cold call to like flush it out. And then it's, you're not getting credit for something you sunk an enormous amount of time into. It's a delicate balancing act, but yeah.
I'll give it like one super quick example. I had a rep one time who booked a meeting with a CFO at a major company at an account their AE hadn't really broken into or had any traction with, but it was like a 30-second cold call where they didn't really talk about much other than agreeing to a meeting. And the AE tried to push back and say there wasn't enough there for him to take a meeting. And it's like, really? Like, what is your job? You're not going to meet with a CFO at one of your major companies, like the decision maker for the product we sell. So it's like, that's a little bit ridiculous. So yeah, it's two sides to the coin, but in general, I tend to lean on, you want to be talking to as many of your qualified personas as possible, regardless of how long or how much you uncovered on these conversations, because that's not always a realistic expectation when you're doing cold outreach.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd say as we transition to this last topic too, just for everyone's reference in the description, if you are a business owner, sales leader, or otherwise, and looking for consultation on your SDR org, that's what Connor and I do with the higher levels team. But lastly, I would say, and this is really specific to, I would say that company that's hiring their first SDR, and or I see a lot of AI startups, especially in the Bay, not calling anyone out specifically, but it's really paying your reps really poorly. Like, you get what you pay for. Now, there's definitely a lot of nuance, and I want to break that down in more detail. It's not like just because you pay a rep from Snowflake $120K that they're going to do really well at your 5-person startup. That's not what we're saying. But I see a lot of companies that are in the AI space right now. I'm seeing several that are trying to pay SDR $60K 5 days a week in office in San Francisco. And man, I just don't see a situation where you're really going to get someone who's high quality, who is going to be willing to put a lot into that opportunity. And really what I would say I see happening most in those situations is either you spend 3 to 6 months convincing yourselves that you're trying to hire someone when realistically no one's even interested, and or you get someone who takes that job for the sole purpose of saying they worked at an AI startup for 6 months so they can use that on their resume to go get a job at Snowflake in the Bay or something of that nature. But Connor, I'd pick your brain because I know we were talking about the math behind this. What are your thoughts on like compensation? If you're a young startup that's very, conscious of funds and things of that nature, where do you even begin to think about compensation? What would you do, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, you said it well. You get what you pay for. I mean, let's take that San Francisco business as an example who's trying to get by cost cutting and get a $60K base salary versus paying, let's say, an $80K base salary. It's a simple math exercise. What is your average deal size? Let's keep it simple. If your average deal size is $100,000 annually, and let's say you convert on average 30% of qualified opportunities, 20 to 30%. So expected value of a qualified op is somewhere in the range of 20 to 30K per op. That rep you're going to be able to get for the 80K base versus the 60K base is probably bringing in 3 to 5 more opportunities on a monthly or even more on a quarterly basis. And then it's like, okay, so like you're saving 20K on the consistent base salary. I get it. Sometimes funds can be tight, but what are you leaving on the table? Those reps generally, one, they're just not generating you as much business. 2, they're more likely to leave. And there's a whole cost to that. So there's just all this risk you're introducing by trying to cut and shave like percent, like just a few $1,000s at times on base salaries. And there's things you can do. You can offer bonuses or equity depending on your business that only vests after they stay a certain amount of time. But in general, pay the extra 10 grand base salary to get the right rep. I can't stress that enough. Like the right rep for your organization will deliver 5 to 10x the results of an average rep.
Yeah. And I'll tell you too, from one, to be clear too, totally fine. 60K was the OTE in San Francisco, 5 days a week. Absolutely nuts. You cannot pay. Yeah, you cannot think that you're going to get quality with someone with like a $40,000 base salary in San Francisco that has to commute into the office. Same goes for New York City, all of your major markets. That's just crazy. But also, I think to your point, it's like, I often think about it this way. Like there's the mathematical component, which you mentioned, which is realistically, if you paid $1,000 to at most $2,000 more a month in base salary, but you go from a rep that is going to generate maybe 3 to 5 opportunities in 6 months before you fire them and or they quit, versus 1.5 to 2K more a month. And now you're getting a rep that's bringing 3 to 5 qualified opportunities to your door every single month. That is hundreds of thousands of dollars of pipeline. And now it just becomes a revenue equation of, hey, I know every time I have a $200,000 in pipeline equates to roughly $50,000 close one every quarter. You've already made your money back by paying that amount. But additionally, I think for those startups out there that are trying to attract talent that are on a lean budget, there's a timing component of this, which I hope our earlier points kind of helped you illustrate. Maybe you're not ready to have an SDR and you're just hoping that you can hire someone and magically they fix all of your pipeline problems. But also on the flip side, especially let's take the example of AI. If you're a quality company that has strong inbound, that has, hundreds of thousands or ideally millions in ARR already, and you're building out an SDR team, there are lots of people who love to work for startups that hate working at large organizations, myself included, that will love what you're looking for. You're not competing against, it's like, if I pay them 100K, they're considering me versus like Oracle or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
There are lots of people who specifically want to work for startups as long as they're, paid fairly. Let's call it 85 to 110K, depending on your startup, depending on the background and qualifications you're looking for, that will actively choose you over a large company if the meat is on the bone there. So again, maybe that's a part 2, and definitely comment below. Like we monitor these ourselves. If you do have other questions, you can also see in the description, by the way, our website where you can contact me and our team directly if you are interested in further consulting or thoughts on building an SDR team, maybe revamping your SDR playbook, etc. Obviously, Connor's a huge part of that, has a channel of his own on YouTube, Connor Murray. But Connor, this is a great conversation. And like I said, I'm just capping it because I'm sure we could talk about this for hours. So if you guys want a part 2, let us know. But Connor, thanks for the time. Any other thoughts on your end before we wrap it up?
No, thanks for having me on. Like I said, it's just a topic that hits close to home because I experienced it as a rep starting out, then as a manager, and now working with you and all these startups and helping them scale their organizations. So yeah, happy to come back on for part 2 when the time comes.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And feel free to reach out, everybody, if you have any questions in the comments or otherwise, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.